Hello, and welcome to what's going to be a detailed overview of all the new weapon variants that have come out today in the new update, Accelerate. We're going to kick off with the dueling spin fuser. This light spin fuser has been modified for dueling, dealing more damage on a direct hit, but having a slightly smaller explosion radius. This means that the damage and splash is going to be the same, but the radius is going to be decreased in order to deal an extra 110 more damage on a direct hit. This means it's going to go from 770 on a direct hit to 880. If you don't have a problem hitting with spin fusers, I do recommend this. I did use this in some TDM, and I do use this as my capper spec now. And I haven't seen any problems with the decreased radius. The decrease is so small that you really don't notice it if you're good at aiming. Other than that, yeah, I would say this is a complete upgrade. We go to the second item, which is the holdout shotgun. This weapon didn't gain popularity until it won the duel between Blood Eagle, Nero Magnus, and the Usurper. Magnus won by clubbing the Usurper in the face after she ran out of ammo. Now at the end it says she ran out of ammo. Well, that makes sense since the clip size in this has been decreased from the shotgun in order to have an increase in damage. The increase is noticeable, especially on heavies when you can get those multiple shots off, and the clip size isn't too big of a deal since it is a shotgun and it has a small fire rate. Compared to the original shotgun, I would say the holdout shotgun is an upgrade. That being said, I still would recommend the light assault rifle over either of those shotguns, especially when you're doing capture the flag. Just gives you a lot more utility, being able to kill people at range. Alright, we have the Compact Nitron. Like the Impact Nitron, Compact Nitrons deal very little damage but force flag drops. This variant has significantly less knockback, but the compact size allows one extra Nitron to be carried. Long story short, it's not worth it. The decrease in knockback means you can't Nitron jump as well. And even with using the thrust pack as a chaser, I like to Nitron myself. It lets you get to the the flag carrier a lot easier, and I've never really had a problem missing with impact nitrons. All in all, I would say this is a complete downgrade, and I don't recommend getting it. Next, we come to the BXT-1A rifle, a personal disapproval of mine since it looks so cool, but unfortunately, it's just not worth it. The BXT-1A does more damage the longer you're in scope. This variant has a slower charge time but can fire more shots. You get 10 shots instead of 5. It doesn't deal any extra damage, and it actually takes longer to deal maximum damage. I've never had an issue with my clip size. I usually pop off 1 or 2 shots and reload anyways. All in all, I'd say it's a complete downgrade. I wasted my points on it already. I would not recommend getting it. Next we have the Nova Blaster MX, a variant of the Nova Blaster that has a better fire rate and a larger clip, but deals less damage per shot. This is going to come down to DPS. The increased fire rate but less damage, all those type of weapons are just going to come down to the DPS, and I have a feeling they're going to have the same DPS. I don't think high-res would make a weapon that's just straight up stronger. Other than that, it does give you an increased fire rate, so if you do have a harder time hitting with the Nova Blaster, you can just get the MX, and more shots means more chances to hit. Other than that, I'm just going to call this a side grade for now. The DPS will decide whether or not. Next we have the Focused Claymore. This Claymore has been modified for greater trigger and explosion distance, but has a smaller trigger angle. This means that you're gonna have a harder time getting them to go through and make them explode. The actual radius in which they have to pass through in order for it to explode has been decreased. Also, the damage has been decreased to increase the overall explosion of it. Not worth it, in my mind. I use Claymore mines as flag carrier deterrents, and flag carriers almost always come in on specific routes, making it easy to place a Claymore mine, and the radius just doesn't come into play. They always run over it, and they'll always take damage from it. The only time I would ever see this being used is if you're in a large area, say you're throwing stuff down on a flag for some reason, I guess in TDM, it can potentially hit more people. Other than that, the damage decrease it isn't worth having a larger radius, since they pretty much have to pass right over it in order to make it explode anyways. Complete downgrade in my mind. I wouldn't recommend getting it. Next we have the Arctic Rhino. This is another one where you deal increased damage, but you have a slower fire rate. While designed for use in frozen conditions, the Arctic Rhino found popularity among Star Wolf warriors when the sole survivor of the battle Ark's Koston was found by medics to be clutching it. As with all weapons like these, as I've already said, it's going to come down to DPS. Dealing more damage per shot at a decreased fire rate, it's just like the NJ5. Could help if you're having a hard time aiming with it, because every shot that you do hit with will deal more damage. Other than that, I'm going to call all these type of weapons side grades, since it will just come down to the DPS. Unlike the SMG, the Arctic SN7, another popular Star Wars conversion, the Arctic SN7 is often carried to Blood Eagle Worlds, where it inevitably trades owners. It has an increased damage at a decreased clip size. This doesn't really come into play too much, since you also get the minus 30% reload time still. So you reload very, very fast, and the increased damage is pretty significant. Since I always use SN7s to pick off enemies after I've used my spin fuser on them, I would completely recommend this weapon. I personally believe it is an upgrade. Next we have the Sticky XL. Sticky grenades deal a massive amount of damage to armored targets such as base turrets, generators, and vehicles. This version has been modified for a wider damage spread. Decreased damage at an increased radius, that's what it means. And since I always use stickies when I know someone's going to run over it, or when I'm attacking a static object such as a generator or a base turret, not really much of an upgrade. The decreased damage just isn't worth having an increased radius, since when you throw a sticky grenade, you plan on it hitting anyways. Downgrade. I would not recommend getting this. Next up we have Gast's Rifle. The custom rifle made famous by Marshal Gast. This weapon uses a larger caliber round, but has a smaller clip size. You're increasing damage at the sacrifice of clip size. Unfortunately, they have nerfed the reload time buff. Still, I did use this in TDM, and I did find it very helpful. The damage goes from 75 to 85 per hit. And when you get that lead on a target, you can take down light classes instantly. Even medium classes go down really, really fast. Overall DPS, I don't think will change, but your DPS per clip will change. I enjoy using it. I would say it is an upgrade. I would recommend getting it if you do Arena or TDM, but you use Ranger a lot. And just as a side note, I say Ranger. It is the soldier class. I'm thinking back to beta when Ranger existed. If you use the rifle as a soldier class. Thumper DX. Another Thumper variant with more damage but less explosion radius. Long story short, it's harder to hit with but deals more damage when you do. If you can aim with this thing, I would recommend using it. It is a direct upgrade. If you can't aim with it, continue using the Thumper D until you get good with it, and then switch to the Thumper DX. I would recommend getting this weapon. Next we have the Short Fuse Frag. This modified XL grenade has had its fuse shortened, giving enemies less time to respond. What also happens with it is you take a damage decrease compared to the frag grenade and a radius increase. This makes it easier to hit with. I generally have problems using these type of grenades. I don't actually use them very often in arenas. I use proximity grenades. All in all, it's got its own place. If you can't aim very well with frag grenades, go ahead, use this. What it does is it increases the radius and the grenade explodes sooner. So I'd call it a side grade. Since it does increase the ability to hit, it does still do a very good amount of damage. We have what's called the Dust Devil, which is an Arcs Buster variant. Modified for dry climates, the Dust Devil, as it is popularly called, is a special variant of the stock Arcs Buster. What happens is you take a damage with, or you deal less damage, but you have an increased radius, making it easier to clear stands and things like that. I would say this is a downgrade, since personally, grenade launcher is still a better weapon to clear stands, and the Arcbester deals more damage. Here we've got the Desert NJ4. Conditioning for arid environments has given this custom NJ4 an increased fire rate at the cost of how much damage it is dealt. That means it deals less damage per shot and has an increased fire rate. This is again going to come down to the DPS charts. If it does have a higher DPS, people who can aim very well will be using this. Other than that, if you're having a hard time hitting with the NJ4 already, I would recommend keeping with it. The increased fire rate but decreased damage means that each particular shot that does hit will deal less damage. And yeah. Next we have the EMP XL grenade. EMP grenades cause damage and energy drain to those caught in the blast. This variant has a larger radius and drains the same amount of energy, but deals less damage. Personally, when you're using this, you're using it to deal direct damage. I don't know people who often use EMP for the energy drain. I guess if you are using it for the energy drain, it can be an upgrade since it will be easier to hit. Other than that, I'd say this is a downgrade. Next up is the Rockwind TCN4 Technician's SMG. This TCN4 modification was first used by the technician Titus Rockwind, who desired a weapon that had the stopping power to drop a bioderm and not blow himself up in the process. What that means is it's an increased damage at a decreased fire. Personally, I think this weapon is going to be an upgrade. The fire rate decrease is very slight and the increase in damage is very significant. I actually believe it's a double increase in damage. That leads me to believe that the DPS will have been increased on this weapon, which, as all fire rate damage weapons, is going to come to that. I'm going to label it, just to be safe, as a side grade for now. Personally, I think this will be an upgrade. Also, since it does have a higher damage per shot at a decreased fire rate, this will be more useful to people who are newer to automatic weapons, since you do deal more damage per shot. Next we have the long-range repair tool. This is an interesting one. Repair tools can bring base turrets, generators, and sensors back online. They can also repair vehicles. This tool has been modified for a longer range, but repairs slightly slower, which means you can repair at range. My personal thoughts on this are infiltrators that like to toss grenades while a technician is repairing the generator. If you can get far enough away from the generator with this weapon, that won't affect you. You can actually chase down the infiltrator without being killed. Or if you're killed, the generator won't have taken damage. The slight decrease in repair, not really much of a problem, since when you do go to repair, you assume the base is cleared and you're not going to get attacked anyways. All in all, I would say this is an upgrade. It's an interesting one too. Next we have the TCNG Quick Fuse, which is a lot like all the other short fuse grenades. You sacrifice damage for radius, and it explodes faster, making it easier to hit with. Personally, when I use TCNGs, it's when I'm an SMG technician and I'm inside of a base. I don't ever use it outside, and it's very easy to hit things inside in a closed area. I would say this is a downgrade if you're using it in that situation. If you have a hard time hitting with TCNGs, or if you're using it outside for whatever reason, this can be an upgrade since it is a lot easier to hit with. Next we come up to the Fusion Mortar Deluxe. Now I've always had a personal pet peeve with the MIRV, since I enjoy using Fusion Mortars as precision weapons and I've never had a hard time hitting with them. The FMD, a very popular personal conversion kit, enhances the Fusion Mortar, giving it a faster projectile that deals more damage but has a smaller explosion radius, which means the explosion radius is decreased for an increased damage. It's not too much of an explosion or radius decrease, and the damage, you know, it maxes it out. All in all, I would recommend this weapon, since personally, I just enjoy using this as a precision weapon. I'm really excited to get this and try it out. I would recommend getting this. The Spin Fuser MKX. Many tribal warriors disdain the modified spin fuses issued to them, and in protest have modified the Spin Fuser MKDs to have performance similar to a standard spin fuser. I think this is a throwback to people complaining that the MKD isn't as strong as the Brute's Spin Fuser. What it does is you take a decrease in radius for an increase in damage. Again, this is going to come down to how well you aim. For people who can aim, this is going to be a direct upgrade. Personally, I use the dual spec, the X1 LMG, the spin discs, and well, I will be using the FMD with that. For those who do use the Spin Fuser MKX, I do believe it will be a direct upgrade, and I would recommend you getting it. Next, we have the Heavy AP XL. AP grenades deal AP grenades deal massive amount of damage to humans, but are very poor against armored targets. This variant has a large explosion radius. As with almost every single one of these grenades, it's damage burst radius. Increased damage, decreased radius. Increased radius, decreased damage. Also, this one does not have the short fuse. The increased radius can make it easier to hit with, but I would recommend keeping the AP grenade since it's not too much of an increase and you might as well keep the damage. All in all, I would say this is a downgrade and I wouldn't recommend this weapon. If the chain gun is relentless, the chain cannon is the right hand of Oblivion. While not technically a cannon, it has been tooled for larger rounds and more damage, resulting in the popular, if incorrect, name. I also believe that this is a reference to people calling it the boom cannon or the doom cannon, or, you know, people calling chain guns cannons. Other than that, it's an increase in damage per hit at a decrease in fire rate. As always, for people who can hit with every single shot, people who can lead targets, it's going to come down to a DPS chart. The chain cannon can be more useful to people who have a harder time aiming, since each particular shot will deal more damage. So, all in all, I'm going to call this one a side grade. Next, we have one that I'm really excited about. It's called the Titan Launcher. The Titan Launcher is a dumbfire rocket that travels in a straight line. It is designed with a very short fuse to aid in mid-air suppression and explodes on any surface contact. Once you get used to the range that this thing has, you can still shoot things in the air. You just don't have as long as a range as a Saber Launcher does. You also deal less damage than the Saber Launcher, but you have an increased radius. Big difference being, you don't have to lock on to shoot this. You can just shoot it. I've never used the Saber Launcher since I never lock onto vehicles. The only time I will ever use a Saber Launcher is if I'm harassing a strike, and you don't get many kills doing that. I will be using this weapon. Personally, I do think it's a direct upgrade, and yeah, I would recommend getting it. It's just too fun to pass up. Next, we have the Defective Frag. A manufacturing defect causes this grenade to explode in a much larger radius than normal. It's actually quite popular. It's again, loss of damage, increased radius. I'm going to say this is a downgrade since it doesn't have a shorter fuse. It isn't easier to hit with necessarily. And the increased radius just is small compared to the frag grenade. Next we come to the Devastator. Devastator Spin Fuser. A favorite among heavies, the Devastator variant deals a little less damage overall, but packs a significantly harder punch on a direct hit. It also has a larger explosion radius, which means on your splash damage, it's gonna deal less damage. The radius is increased, so it is easier to hit with, making it very user-friendly for new players. And if you can get those direct hits, it does deal a lot more damage. This is an interesting one because the only situation that I could see it not being worthwhile is that kind of middle ground when you can hit with the Spin Fuser most of the time, but you can't get those direct hits off. Personally, I can get direct hits most of the time, making it very useful for me. And even still, I use Spin Fusers more to knock people around than to particularly kill them. I would say, all in all, this is for the most part an upgrade. Unless you are in that middle ground, then just keep working at it, and once you got those direct hits on, move up to this. I would recommend getting this. Next we have the Hammer. Popular among smaller tribes with fewer resources, the hammer was modified to be more ammo efficient. Ironically, the phase drop in the hammer refers to warriors who are cowardly in combat. What happens is you have a decreased size for an increase in damage. Sorry. I haven't used this weapon yet, but I believe it's going to be just like the holdout shotgun. The damage will be noticeable, and the decreased clip size isn't going to be too big of a deal, especially since you do also have the minus 25% reload time buff once you max out this weapon. So all in all, I would say it's an upgrade, and if you do use the automatic shotgun on brutes, go ahead and get it. Finally, we come to the extended fractal grenade. This fractal grenade has a slightly longer duration but deals less damage per blast, which means for each hit it deals less damage, but it stays there for longer. I don't like this. I think, in my personal opinion, this is the stupidest thing they could have done. Because this just makes running in as a brute and throwing fractal grenades on the flag all the more profitable, since even though the damage has been decreased, the duration has been increased and the knockback is still there. So you can still harass Doombringers very, very easily using that tactic, just running in, throwing fractals, and dying. Also, since fractals don't deal damage to your partners, it can free up a stand very easily. So even though it is I would call this an upgrade. I have a bone to pick with it, yeah. Anyways, thank you for listening, go feel free to watch my other videos. As always, my in-game name is KrunchyQuipBox. Feel free to add me. I'll have the spelling below. Also, as with my other video on the overview update, I'm going to have a link to patch notes, so I would recommend checking that out. Anyway, see you guys later.